So what's the SL6 like, and what's it like moving from an SL5 to an SL6? Well, there's no massive difference. I'm not gonna ride along here and tell you, oh, it's amazing, it's so stiff yet flexible and compliant, and I just feel like I'm flying and all that bullshit, because it's not that different a bike. It's just very subtle tweaks here and there, and there's a couple of things that I've noticed. It's a little bit more stable. The SL5 felt a little bit more flickable, which has its pros and cons. It's nice to have a bit more stability on fast descents and things, so it's neither here nor there. It's not massive anyway. There's possibly a little bit more comfort because the seat tube is less supported, a bit more flex there, so I can feel a touch more comfort. And it's a little bit lighter, but you know, you're not going to feel 150 grams, but it helps. And so overall, really, it feels very similar. And you know, I've tried to keep things as constant between the two bikes as I can. I've transferred everything over. Same gears, same wheels, exact same handlebar setup and stem. So it's as close as it can be. And to be honest, I mean, if you run 10 psi less pressure in your tyres, you're going to get much more of a different feeling than this whole frame change would. So, and you know, I've taken my time to give my thoughts, because you can't really give a good opinion in 1 or 2 days. You got to ride the bike quite a bit, and also it's been the winter and we've had good weather in Mallorca, but a bit colder, a bit windier, and when the wind's blowing, it's very hard to feel what the bike's doing exactly. So now is a much better time. Right, so here it is, the new Sworks SL6. And what's different? Well, we have lowered seat stays, slightly aero profile, but not terribly. Kind of aero around here, a little bit more give in the seat post area here to make up for the fact that you've probably got a slightly more rigid seat post. The fork is noticeably more narrow and aero. It's really quite slender. I think probably most of the aero gains come from that. The down tube profile was very round. It's slightly more teardropped, but it's not massively. And then the rest of the bike really is very similar. The frame is very similar to how it was before. A little bit of a cutout for the rear tyre. It's not as close as it could be, but I'm not running that big tyres. They're 25s. It's fact 12 R now instead of 11. They've obviously tweaked the carbon fibre a little bit. It's about 130 grams lighter than the SL5, which is nice to have. Brakes are a bit dirty, sorry about that. But they're dual mount, which you can feel there's a little bit more power there. They are slightly heavier, but it's worth it, because there's really, in the dry, you're not lacking for braking power at all. On carbon rims, it's fine. In the wet, obviously, it's completely terrible, but we're used to that. The chain set, I did really like the S-Works chain sets, but I broke mine. The axle sheared in half. So, and they're really hard to find now. So I ended up just going for a SRAM Red, which is more or less the same weight, and I'm quite pleased with it. It shifts very nicely. Oh, that needs to go back in. Sorry. So yeah, everything really else has been transferred over from the SL5. So it's all pretty similar stuff, and it should feel more or less the same. And one nice little detail here is this little cover was in aluminium, bizarrely, and weighed 5 grams. So I got this made up in carbon, and it weighs 2 grams. So a little bit of a tweak. Let me know if you want one, because the carbon fibre place down the road makes them. So really, actually, one of the main things to watch out for is that the seat post is quite set back. And at first I didn't really take that into account too much, and but it felt a little bit odd. Cockpit felt too big, so I've moved it forward quite a way. The seats move forward and it's a lot better. So that's worth bearing in mind. I might order, they make a 0 setback post. I might order one of those. It might look a bit better. And the clamp, even though it says for carbon rails, does not actually clamp this AX like this properly. So I've had to kind of bodge it with tape a little bit to get a proper grip. Otherwise it moves. So what's the conclusion? Well, I can't give you a super mega rave review because it's a nice bike and it does what it says on the tin, but it hasn't propelled me into pro status, unfortunately. Yeah, it's great. The changes between this and the SL5 are pretty subtle. Minor improvements, slightly more aero, touch less weight. Doesn't really translate to, you can't feel that on the road really. Yeah, I mean, you know, the bikes these days are all getting very similar. Cervelo R5, there's a new Focus which looks similar to this, very nice. Canyon, and nice, good bikes. So yeah, it's just a question of price and looks really, and some very minor differences in geometry and weight, bit of aero here and there. I reckon you're probably saving something like 5 watts at full power, full speed on this thing, which is pretty minor really, but it's all nice to have, I suppose. So yeah, it's stiff, it's light, it climbs well, descends well. What more could you want really?